Hello and welcome to another edition of Prove All Things. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or X, or on the CGI Digital Network app, whether that's on your phone, tablet, or television. Thank you for joining us live, and for everyone else, we thank you for joining us as a podcast or watching later as well. I'm joined with co-host Mike James. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Jeff, doing well. I got back from a long trip to New Mexico. I spoke to our group in Aztec, New Mexico this past weekend, checked up on them. I was driving through the desert, Jeff, the Mojave Desert, and it was 9 a.m. and it was about 107 in the desert at that time. So I was glad to get out of the desert.
Yeah, we had church west of Atlanta. We're doing like a satellite church like test to see if we can support a church west of Atlanta, and we did it in Lithia Springs this past Sabbath, and we're gonna do it one more time in August to see how it goes, and then we'll evaluate it from there. But we had a pretty good turnout. And
how far is that from Atlanta? How many miles?
I mean, it's still, you can say it's still within the Atlanta metropolitan area because that's
Okay.
a really big area, but it's about an hour from our other church.
Okay, got it. Well, that'd be neat if you get something going there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just west of town, so we're trying to see if there's a way we could serve people west of town, and see what happens. And we had a new person show up to this, and we had some people who live over that way who were there as well. That normally come to our church in Lawrenceville, and so it turned out pretty good turnout for it, and we're just going to keep testing and see what we can do there.
Great.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and bring in our guest today, Jason Steeves from Houston, Texas. How you doing, Jason?
Hey, I'm doing well, Jeff.
Hey Jason.
Appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah, good to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's good to have you with us today. Definitely, you're brand new to our program, and we always are excited to have a brand new guest to the program. So I guess for everyone who's watching out there, give us some of your background, who you are, where you're from, and what you're going to talk to us about today.
Yeah, so I'm here, and as you mentioned, Houston, Texas. I'm actually pretty much born and raised here in Houston, Texas, and I was raised really in the Protestant churches growing up as a kid, and didn't have any family members as far as I knew in any churches of God, and came in 2015 when I was doing some online research about the history of the church. So,
okay, the history of the Church of God, or just history of the church in general? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the initial thoughts were I was trying to find out like the history of the church from Christ to today, like those who actually were following Christ and his teachings and the disciples. And it brought me to a booklet that was in article form put out by Living Church of God. And so that's when I basically that whole day, it was on a Sunday, I read through that whole booklet, and I was, kind of blowing my mind in the sense, but I reached out to the local minister that day, and he got back with me 2 days later in an email, and then we met 2 days after that, and it was about a week after that I went to my first service with the Church of God. So it was with Living down here in Houston. So that was my first service was actually Atonement 2015. So
it's good to hear that, because a lot of people we have on this program, they grew up in the church, and so having someone who came in as an adult is always exciting to see that journey, to see what brought you in. And I think a lot of people like you do their research on the internet, and they'll find something from Living or Cagua or CGI or something out there, and they'll kind of go down a rabbit trail that includes a lot of study, and there's a lot of that out there.
Yeah. I had been doing some study for a while, and God had kind of led me to prove the Sabbath before I even came into the Church of God.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting because it was about a month before I found Living here locally that my wife and I were just kind of, hey, let's just do the Sabbath here at home, like stay at home and not do anything. And so that's something that that we did, and I think God just kind of honored that, obviously, by bringing us into the church. I think is a big blessing. So
there's a joke there by Life Lessons on Atonement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. We came into the service, and we did decide to fast, but we didn't know that fasting meant also no water. So we walked into the service with our water bottles, drinking our water.
So yeah. I guess that must have been interesting for the people there.
Yeah. It was funny.
All right. Well, hey, glad to have you on here today. And I guess you have some some knowledge that is health wise related, I guess, based on from maybe your career. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that, kind of what you're going to talk to us about today?
Yeah, I've kind of been raised in, I guess you could say, the health, natural health or nutrition lifestyle, because my dad, when I was actually in my mom's womb, like when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad was diagnosed with a severe form of rheumatoid arthritis in his spine. So the name of it's called ankylosing spondylitis. So it's pretty bad. It tends to cripple people. If you want to, there's actually a picture on that we have, Jeff, where at the beginning of that slideshow, I think it's the second slide.
All right, I'll let you go to that.
Yeah. Slide. So this is actually a picture of somebody that was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, and you can kind of see the date there, 1947. And this is a 25-year progression of the disease for this guy. So it's pretty bad, as you can tell.
What causes something like? Is there a cause for this type of thing?
So that is always the question, right? What is the cause? Because if you can find the cause, then can't you find the solution? Well, what I've come to believe in understanding God more is that He is, of everything, He's the great causer. We know this. It's in Scripture, right? The correlations I think is what we need to kind of be thinking about, is what's important for us, is what are the things in our life that kind of contribute to or correlated with developing health problems like this. I think that's a better way for us to frame it based on what I've learned in working in the health space.
Okay.
Because causation it's really hard to determine exact causes to things, right? If someone says this causes this in regard to a health issue, I sometimes question whether they have the knowledge of how things work, or they're pushing some sort of agenda, and so that's something that you want to be careful of, is like, okay, what does cause this? Now, there are some correlations that are very strong in regard to a itis, right? So ankylosing spondylitis, the label has to do with inflammation, right? So inflammation is something that our body naturally does. Our body naturally goes through an inflammatory process in response to when we get injured, right? You kind of hurt yourself and it swells up, right? When, you've heard of anaphylaxis, right? That's an extreme inflammation that happens really quickly. So inflammation is something that our body does. to kind of respond to a health issue, right? It needs to deal with whatever's going on. With these itises that are in the medical, these diagnosis of itises, it usually has to do with a kind of a chronic underlying inflammation in the body that builds and builds over time. That's not essentially resolved, because inflammation is actually designed to start the process, address the problem, and then resolve and heal or repair the issue. That's the way our body is designed, is to repair that injury or that offense. But the reason these inflammations or itises persist, they call them chronic, right? Is because that inflammation doesn't resolve that. And for whatever reason, one of the ways you can describe it is there's not enough of the needed resources, right? Some things are like, maybe there's not enough proper nutrition, maybe there's not enough good water, maybe the person's not getting enough good sleep or rest or recovery. There's these principles that are at play. Maybe there's too much stress, like maybe they're too stressed about something mentally or emotionally, and that's a big issue that's leading to it. There's all these factors that you can look at, and it's very individual too. Like one person may be a very mentally, emotionally challenged and stressed person, and that may be the biggest contribution.
Right.
But this person over here, it may be like maybe major diet and digestive issues that are leading to it. So yeah, causing of an itis like ankylosing spondylitis, there's multiple factors for each person, but sometimes there's major ones for certain people. With my dad, it was very interesting. So he grew up, just doing the typical American lifestyle, and processed foods and medications, and like just living the typical American lifestyle. And even, unfortunately, he admits it, even some recreational drugs. And so, but what he believes, and it kind of showed, is that his nutrition, poor nutrition, inflammatory lifestyle, and chemicals in the form of, drugs, medications, things like that were kind of excessive, were really putting a big burden on his body and depleting his body severely. And so he started changing that. He actually, he learned from different mentors. When he was diagnosed, he was like, the doctors didn't really have answers. They were like, we can give you this medication or this, but their response was essentially, this is kind of what happens, right? You're going to be in a wheelchair around 40 or 50 years old. Cause he was diagnosed and he was like 20, I think he was 24 or something.
Wow.
Yeah. And so they were basically telling him he was going to be in a wheelchair when he was like 40 or 50. And you, when you get crippled and your body can't really move and you're in a wheelchair, it's not long after that you're going to expire, because your body can't handle not functioning and moving very long. So that's not a life that he wanted. And he's like, there has to be another way. And so he really started seeking things out. And it was through that process he developed, started to become more aware of God and the Bible and Jesus. And so he was not really a church goer when he was younger, but started to believe in Jesus and attend, Protestant churches. This is when I was a kid growing up. And so it was a combination of learning about how God created the body to repair, and also learning about God in to an extent. I think that it seems like there's certain levels of understanding about God and his ways that, God gives people, even if they may not be aware of his plan and, the gospel of the kingdom and things like that. So that's something I guess I've seen in his relationship, it seems, with God. And so, so that's been interesting. But he's now, if you see in this next slide, Jeff, he's now in his 60s and he's running around with his grandkids and, nowhere near a wheelchair, doing exercises, climbing trees. So that's something that that he's been living out, these changes in his lifestyle, and really having the belief that his body can repair if he really works on giving it what it needs. And so that's been, and it's been great because he's been able to help many other people out of that. His first career was electrical work. He was an electrician for a big generator company. And he did that for about 15 years. And he started to get more and more people interested in getting his input on what they could do for their health. And so he started helping people. And 15 years into doing electrical work, he and my mom decided to go full time into helping people with their health. And that was in 94. So that was about 32 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they've been doing that 32 years, and I've been working with them on and off for the last 18 years, helping them with projects and with clients and things like that. And so,
yeah. Hey, the story of your dad's very, very interesting. And I kind of relate a little bit because I was diagnosed. It's been now over 20 something years with lymphoma. And the thing about when they diagnosed me with lymphoma is I was like, well, where's lymphoma come from? And they're like, we don't know. We don't know. How do you get it? They're like, we don't have an idea. We just know what it is and how it affects the body. And that's kind of like it's a cancer, maybe it's an inflammation, whatever. But fortunately, from the oncologist I had, I haven't had it since. I've actually been taking a supplement called turmeric, which I don't know if you're familiar with turmeric. That it has very high anti-cancer properties. So I've not had cancer since then.
Yeah.
So there are healthy ways to address things out there, I think. And I just know from my personal experience that there was something there that was different than maybe chemotherapy that some people can use, and that's fine. But for me, it was something different.
Yeah. It's something that's health is a very controversial issue because it's very personal.
Yeah.
Right. And, I think we talked a little bit about this just before we went on. There's different applications that each person needs to make in regard to dealing with their health issues. Like the way that you decide to respond to your health issue is very personal. And what you need to do is, because there's so many parallels to our physical body and our relationship with God and each other that are taught in Scripture. God shows us, he's essentially wanting us to learn that our body is one of the ways that we learn to develop his character, like the trials that we experience in this body, and then the body of Christ too, right? Our relationships with each other. And so that's something that has kind of opened my eyes, and learning more about the church is the whole purpose of us going through these physical trials is what leads back to God's purposes of seeking godly offspring, right? He wants us to develop his character in us.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the biggest thing. And part of what I wanted to touch on today was what is essentially our first response to these health challenges?
Right.
We can get back to some of these other testimonies of healing, but yeah, what we do in response to our health challenges is kind of really important. And now some people are wanting, and it's interesting. Some of these comments I really appreciate this because they're being really honest. Because, I've worked in the health space for 18 years and it's hard because some people do well and some people don't do so well. And, it is hard because, it's again,
I guess everybody eventually is going to die. So of some reason or somehow, I guess we do the best we'll have with what we got, but eventually it's going to end. Right.
Yeah, we can't. Making health changes is the goal. Cannot be to live forever, obviously, because
right.
That's not something we have control of. That's God's territory. And so the goal really should be the quality of our life, right? Quality of our relationships, the quality of our relationship with God ultimately. That should be the goal in our pursuit of taking care of our health. Not necessarily like I'm going to live forever, or live to 180 or, like.
Yeah, and Jason, there are companies today who are trying to push that agenda. And they have God is not in their equation.
No.
They're talking in such a way that they want to take over the levers of control of existence, which they can't. But
Right. Yeah. No. I saw this comment. One of these people, and I totally relate with this. He talked about promoting and selling nutritional products. He talks about getting tired of babysitting people.
What does he mean by that from your perspective?
Well, here's the thing. Like when people come and seek out health, basically seek out me or my dad, to help with their health. There are people that come that, take responsibility, right? They just want to learn what they can do and they take better care of their health.
Right.
And there are some people that look for kind of they're not necessarily digging deep enough to try to find out what they need to change within themselves. They're more of like wanting to get rid of the problem and want to know like, what are the answers to get rid of the problem? Right. Okay. That's the kind of the main thing. And it eventually comes to be like needing to babysit people like, no, you can't do that. You got to do this. Like, and it doesn't tend to work because.
Hey, Jason, is it that some people want like an easy solution when maybe the solution is not easy?
That tends to be the people that kind of want to like what is that phrase? A pill for an ill, or like,
okay. So what I'm hearing from you. Tell me if I'm right, Jason, because I talked to my brother who's into health and nutrition, and he works with some people. But they want like, okay, this product is going to take care of that. All you do is take this, rather than thinking, hey, I also got to sleep a certain amount of time. I got to get exercise. I got to get rid of stress. They're not thinking about all these other things. They just want, boom, that solution.
Right. Yeah. And kind of comes back to, well, it's kind of how we've been trained too, to think about health and the way that the health system is kind of, promoted you may have looked into this before or heard it before, but like there's the terrain or cell theory versus the what is it called? I just blanked on it. Antoine Béchamp versus Pasteur. It's the terrain or cell theory versus the theory of essentially disease coming upon us almost randomly, where it just kind of, there's a virus and then we get sick, right? And there's like, you can't really explain it, so there's the interesting thing is I've kind of come to see that there's a kind of a melding of the two ideas. They're not necessarily completely at odds with one another.
Okay.
And so that's something that we can get into another time, is kind of observe those two theories and look at the principles that God teaches in Scripture about how we are supposed to respond to health issues and what happens as a result.
Uh-huh.
But that's a very deep dive. So we can get into another time, but yeah, did I answer your question? Like,
Yeah. There's another one here, just a comment from you. He said that he met an oncologist 40 years ago that told him he knew which patients would survive their cancer within 15 or 20 minutes after diagnosis based on their attitude. Now, I know that, we can't say that's 100%, but how important do you feel attitude and your mindset is when it comes to disease?
Yeah. Well, I think that tends to be where it starts, right? I mean, how we respond is important, right? We want to definitely have a mentality or belief that things have to be able to get better, right? Now, we may not be able to completely resolve a health issue in our lifetime. Like, with my dad, right? He's got residual effects, right? He's not in perfect health, and none of us really are in perfect health. So we're going to deal with health issues, but how we respond. Have y'all ever heard of Viktor Frankl? His book called Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
That he touches a lot on how he observed in the concentration camps. They could tell when someone was like about to die because of their mindset, right? Their attitude. And so there is a lot to that, definitely. Now, we do want to make sure we also give opportunity, though, for people that do doubt when they hear the truth, maybe at another point, maybe they will have a shift in mindset later on. So that initial response isn't always the case for that person, because something can happen later on that helps them eyes open or wake them up to.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
But I noticed this other comment there. It talked about the classic debate of nature versus nurture. Does nurture fit into faith? I like that, because it is important to think about, right? Like, in faith, because often people think faith is just like almost like a blind thing. Like, you just believe and then, you don't have any sort of like foundation. But when you look at the definition, like, faith is off of evidence that God has given us, right?
Right.
And so that's the thing that is important to understand is
faith is how we respond to the evidence, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, and so I think that sometimes, one of the things we may have is we may be lacking evidence in regard to ourselves. Like, we may not have enough evidence for believing something. So maybe we just need to get more evidence. Or we may have enough evidence and we're just not doing anything with it. We're not taking the next step. And so that's another thing, because you have to take, and that's one of the things I've seen in my relationship with God and learning a lot of these truths coming into the church of God, is I have to be willing to take a step of obedience. And then it's sometimes on the other side of that he brings in more information, more evidence, more, truth that comes to my understanding. And I think that's for all of us. It's very individual, and there's not anything exactly specific. It may be God shows you what it is that is your primary health, thing that's bringing you back. We talked a little about this. Like, is it stress? Is it your nutrition? Is it, lack of sleep? Is it, what are these factors that could be contributing? And so there's principles that are in scripture with that. I think there's some in the slideshow that I put together. So there's one response that we can have when we're having health challenges is, what is our body telling me? So this is something, right? People tend to think that if they go to doctors, the doctors will be able to tell them what their body is telling them, right? But
Listen, I got a great story. I got to say right at this point. So my mother's 90 right now. So, I've been taking her to the doctor every 6 months to get checkups. And the first time we went to this new doctor when we moved into California, her blood pressure was very high. So they got all alarmed. They start talking about blood pressure medication. And I said, wait a minute. Let's take her blood pressure again and again. And so they had me take it at home for a month. And, twice a day I was taking it, and it became in the normal range almost all the time. But they immediately wanted to start talking about blood pressure medication before we even had a conversation. It was just incredible to see that.
Yeah. Well, and here's the way that I process things in regard, because I'm not a medical doctor. I don't pretend to try to do that. Right. I'm just a guy who's been learning, and I want to help people, encourage people in regard to what I've learned. And so the doctors have been trained in a certain way of assessing. Really, it's assessing disease, right? Does person have this disease or not? Right.
Okay.
That's kind of what they've been trained in. And so they diagnose the disease category that they've been trained to do, and that is connected with the system of I guess you could say tools or solutions that their health system has, right?
Okay.
Those tools and solutions tend to be pharmaceutical medications, surgery, and then like chemical, responses, like you mentioned, chemotherapy, Jeff. So these are the tools that they've been trained to recommend based on the system of diagnosing disease and responding in that way. Well, one of the mentors of mine that I've had directly for about 8 years, indirectly, actually, he mentored my dad as well. His name's Dr. Russell Jaffe. He's trained as an MD. He has a PhD. He's also a biochemist. He developed different tests for health tests. He developed supplements. Like, this is the type of doctor, like, brilliant guy, like knows how to see what's going on with the body. When he was first trained, he started working at the National Institutes of Health, right? You're probably familiar with that phrase.
Yeah.
He actually worked alongside, back in the 70s, he worked alongside a gentleman named Dr. Fauci. I think people have heard that name before. And so Dr. Jaffe was there when there were some decisions being made about how to structure the way to do the health system and how the government was involved. And the more and more that he saw, based on what I heard, he didn't necessarily outright say things that he saw, but he saw, I guess you could say the phrase, the writing was on the wall, that the decisions in regard to how to teach about health were not necessarily for the benefit of the people as much as it was for agendas to promote certain, I guess you could say, industries and products. And
Right.
So it would restrict it. Part of the way he saw that was the restriction and how they did research. In regard to doing health research, what he explained was you have to give the scientist the freedom of resources and time to actually get an unbiased result. And so that's something that they started putting restrictions on. They put restrictions in time and other things. And so he saw they're pushing a certain agenda. They're not necessarily wanting the truth about the health results from our research. And so that was very interesting. And I've learned a lot from Dr. Jaffe, and he's very long time ago left National Institutes of Health and started teaching people about their bodies and how they can help their body repair. And so that's a big basis for the knowledge that I have, is learned from him. And then I mentioned working with my dad over the years. I've just been fortunate enough to be around these men who have really wanted to actually get results in regard to health, rather than just kind of push a product or an agenda, all the time. Right. Now, they do have products that they sell, but the main products that my dad and this doctor sells are nutritional supplements, really. They're dietary supplements at high concentrations. So
what do you think about supplements in general compared to just having a proper diet? I know it's all individual. I mean, some people's bodies are different than others. I get all that, but just in general, do you feel that supplements are needed if you've got a good balanced diet? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that if someone focuses on their diet first and really dials that in, and maybe gives a timeline of 3-6 months, maybe a year of just focusing on, let me really get my diet in order before I maybe look at supplements. If someone does that, I would say they would get 80% of their health issues dealt with 80% of the people and 80% of the health issues are probably going to start resolving if they really focus on, getting their diet in order. Now, this is not to mention, like, obviously we need to work on exercise and sleep and, managing our stress and getting our hydration is a big one, these other things. But diet goes a long way. But here's the thing. Supplements, the question is why are supplements here? Like, that's something I want people to think about is why do supplements exist? They're something that that have come into the market, I guess you could say. They've become a product in the market right around the time of the industrial age, right? When we started doing big farming practices and processing our foods. And what happened when we did these large farming practices and started processing our foods? The nutrient levels in our foods started to drop big time.
Right.
And so what some of these doctors saw was, if these nutrient levels are dropping in our foods, we need to get these nutrient levels replenished.
Right.
And so that's what I've seen in regard to supplementation. Now, that's not to mention, herbs are actually considered supplements, but if you get a proper herbal supplement, it's kind of complete a food, really. Like if you get an herb that's like they've just kind of crushed the herb up and put it into a tablet or a capsule, that has more well-rounded nutrient structure than just, a dietary nutrient, for example, that is concentrated.
Well, what is it's like turmeric? I take turmeric, and again, what the doctor had told me, the oncologist, I think he's like one of the best oncologists because he understood some things. He said that from what he understood in studies is that in India, where turmeric was really high used in foods, the cancer rate was really low. So he saw like some kind of correlation between the turmeric and lower cancer. So that's the reason why I take that. But I think but it's not really. It's just something you can use in food also if you wanted to put it on your food and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, turmeric has certain nutrients in it that actually are antioxidant in their effect. So they help with resolving the inflammation process that we talked about earlier. That's really the power of turmeric is its nutrients help give the body what it needs to resolve that inflammatory process. And that's why it works so well. And if you're consistent with taking it, you're not going to take it for a week and then problem's going to be gone. See, over time of nourishing your body with that.
I've taken it for like 25 years now, and still no cancer. So
that's good. Yeah. So I would say, turmeric is definitely an herb. You could say it's an herb. It's a root essentially. And you can buy it from the store. I mean, usually if you go to the store, it looks a little bit like ginger, but it's an orange color. And you can just buy it and you can either juice it or, you can cut it up and, eat it. It's not great to just eat, but usually the best way to get turmeric is buy it in the root form from the store and juice it and drink that each day, and it doesn't have to be a lot of juice, just, a few ounces. That's a good way to do it. But yeah, that's kind of, as far as supplements go, you could say in a sense they're needed because if they're the right ones and they contain the nutrients that your body is depleted in and you want to get results quickly. That's what I've seen. For example, one of the things that has been commonly depleted in our modern day in our bodies is vitamin C. One of the modern day manifestations of vitamin C deficiency are respiratory health issues. And most people don't realize they've heard the word scurvy back in the day. And when they first learned about vitamin C supplementation, and they did that for dealing with scurvy. Scurvy, actually, part of the scurvy issue was a respiratory problem. And there is a correlation and connection between that health problem and you could say the coronaviruses. And so that's something that people aren't necessarily always aware of. Another thing having to do with vitamin C is our body uses vitamin C to create new white blood cells and give those white blood cells fuel for doing their job. And the white
did not know that either. So
yeah, so white blood cells are responsible for many different things, right? Most people think of white blood cells as like they're protecting my body from viruses, right? Most people think of that. Now, one of the things that people may not be as aware of that white blood cells do is they are involved in that resolution of inflammation and repairing the body. There's this white blood cell called a natural killer cell that is designed to identify cancer cells and essentially break them down and delete them. And so that's something that if we know, like, we have the resources in our body to essentially get rid of cancer, we probably want to help those resources, right? And do things that, try to prevent doing things that suppress those functions. And that's another side of it. Yeah.
So vitamin C is important. We want to make sure we get our vitamin
definitely.
C, right?
Yeah. And there's foods that, like, let's talk about the supplement side and then we'll touch on the other thing. But so, like, you can get a vitamin C supplement, but it's important that you choose the right one. Most of the vitamin C supplements on the market are not going to be a good idea because they're made from different sources that are either synthetic, so they're petroleum based, or they're coming from genetically modified sources like our modern day corn. And so you don't really want to be using that in regard to supplementing. It's not going to provide your body with the resources that it needs in order to repair and nourish those white blood cells.
How do you know what source they're making their vitamin C from? Is it on the packaging? Or
you won't always know, but the best way to know whether you want to take a vitamin C supplement or not is the type of vitamin C that's labeled. Ascorbic acid is something that you want to avoid. That's what most vitamin C supplements on the market are in the form of in that product.
Okay.
And why is that? What is ascorbic acid?
I've so ascorbic acid is it's one of the forms of vitamin C. There's a couple other forms that vitamin C comes in. There's DL, and it kind of goes, the way it's labeled is DL ascorbate. And then the kind that you want to look for and it would be best to supplement with is L ascorbate. So there's an L-ascorbate. Sometimes they just label it ascorbate, but that's
what does the L mean?
I'm not too familiar with that as far as like the D and the L. I've just kind of become aware of them in general. But yeah, it's essentially identifying the different way that it's structured, you could say. It's kind of down to the chemical structure of it and the way it responds to other atoms and chemicals. So that's kind of what it's related to. But yeah, so the L-ascorbate is what you want to look for. And you want to also make sure that it has...
Now, is that found in, like, if I just eat oranges and apples?
Yeah, so vitamin C, the L-ascorbate naturally occurs in fruits and vegetables. There's a little bit, some other foods. Potatoes have vitamin C in them. There's rose hips is an herb that has a good amount of vitamin C in it. And then there's some like kiwi. Kiwi has a good amount of vitamin C in it. There's different plants that have a higher concentration. Potato is actually the vitamin C that I've been using for many years is sourced from potato. And so,
well, I love potatoes. So.
Yeah. So that's a good way to nourish the body and get a good amount of vitamin C. Now, with the vitamin C, that's just kind of one example of a nutrient that our body can be depleted in, and we can get a lot of benefit from supplementing that. Now, I mentioned rose hips. You can find herbal supplements with rose hips that can help nourish the body and get the vitamin C that it needs. So that's another route you can go if you prefer doing an herbal source rather than like a nutrient, like a dietary supplement nutrient. And then as far as diet goes, we talked about some of the foods just now. On the other side, we want to make sure we avoid certain things that suppress, if we're doing this example of the white blood cells, certain things that suppress white blood cell function. I bet everybody may know this. The first thing that I'm going to say is refined sugars, right? Yeah, that's going to suppress white blood cell.
Like high fructose corn syrup.
Right. Exactly. All those refined sugars that are in processed foods, all the forms really. Now, there's some that are going to be better, right? Like there's like agave that's like a sugar that, you can get in some ingredients that's just like a natural sweetener. And some others that are better. But yeah, usually you want to try to avoid those sweeteners. Like honey is okay. That's a good sugar source. And then fruits, the sugars in fruits, if you have it in a fruit, like if you're eating a fruit, it's not going to cause a problem in regard to sugar the same way you would having refined sugars, because it's balanced. It has water in there. It has fiber. And it has other properties like antioxidants and other minerals and nutrients. So that's something that people, sometimes they'll like, well, I need to avoid fruit to get rid of this health problem that's associated with sugar intake. It may not necessarily be just fruit across the board. It may be, let's say, banana. Banana, for example, is a fruit that is a much higher concentration of sugar and a much harder on the body as far as raising the blood sugar because of why. The main reason is it's low in fiber and water. And so that's something you want to keep in mind if you're trying to be better about consuming a balanced diet. The fruits that the majority of fruits you want to consume need to have high fiber and water content. And you can usually tell, right? Like if you're having to chew on it a lot and when you bite on it, there's juice that comes out. Those are the high fiber water foods, right? And so apples are a good example of that, right? A lot of fiber, a lot of water, because you have to chew on it, and when you bite in, there's a lot of juice that comes out. So that's a way to think about that. But yeah, there's okay. So we're talking about supplementation, whether it's a need. It's not necessarily a need, but sometimes can be, and because of our health issues. And our food degrading the way it is, and our health issues compounding over years, I've seen a lot of people get great results very quickly using high concentration of supplemental nutrients. It kind of brings them back to that baseline level of health much quicker when you get a higher concentration of nutrients very quickly. Now, that doesn't, the comment earlier in regard to babysitting people and them complaining in regard to symptoms, that's what will happen is when you get a high concentration of nutrients, and let's go back to the vitamin C example, sometimes there's things that happen. Like one of the things with vitamin C, if you get a good one, if you have a high concentration, it will lead to loose bowels.
Oh.
And so now, obviously, you can't function if you're having loose bowels all day. So you don't want to be doing that all the time. But if you manage it well, you can do maybe a vitamin C, what I call a vitamin C cleanse, where you take a high concentration of vitamin C maybe once a week, and you kind of intentionally induce kind of a watery bowel flush to find out where your health is. You could, some people call it like a self-test. So you find out where your body is as far as the limit that it needs of vitamin C to induce that watery bowel flush. And so again, this is all using that high quality vitamin C so that because the other vitamin C could be more, I guess you could say, could be more harmful and irritating. There's actually research that shows that a certain form of vitamin C, the research was on ascorbic acid, can contribute to, for example, like kidney stones. Okay. And so that's why doctors will often say, no, I don't want you to have vitamin C because I don't want you to, you're having issues with hydration and water in your kidneys. So I don't want you to, have kidney stones. But if you get the right vitamin C, it actually has the opposite effect. It'll help clear out your kidneys and help get rid of a buildup of stones in your system if you get that right vitamin C. So the form is very important. But yeah, that's one example you can do with high concentrations of a nutrient, and you'll get an effect. But doesn't mean that you're having a problem with your health, right? If you're getting more, because that's something people will often notice when they're starting to take care of their health. Sometimes they may get sick, like they may get a fever, or they may get nauseous, or that's something that may happen when someone starts making changes. And there's reasons for that. What I've found, one of the reasons for that is they're trying to do too much too quickly. That can happen. And you're going from eating processed foods all the time to eating fresh foods. I mean, that could be a big, huge change for your body that could be really hard to handle sometimes. And so that's something, I actually labeled my website adaptandrepair.com for that reason, right? We want to understand that our body is able to adapt, but we need to think like we got to be patient, right? With any sort of change, we got to be patient and take it step by step. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves, or we'll add some additional problems, so that's something that is I want people to kind of be encouraged that it doesn't necessarily mean your health is going bad again. It may just be that your body's trying to adapt and it's having a challenging time when you're adapting to these new, healthy changes. Because people it's really easy to get discouraged, so.
We got a question here, Jason, about the new drugs that are leading people to lose weight.
Yeah.
Ozempic and things like that.
Right.
Is there a food source, or is there anything natural that kind of does a little bit of that for you? Is there anything?
Yeah. So I can actually send some information if people reach out to me and let me know I've got more detailed information on it. But essentially, yes. So what you want to think about is these peptides are naturally produced by the body. And what the medical industry is probably going to tell you is they're going to either say something like your body doesn't produce those peptides anymore, or, it's not going to be able to, or something like that. Right. So you just need to use them now. And well, if you think about it that way, then you're going to have to be using them the rest of your life. So that's something that you have to be cautious of is that belief system that there can't be any repair that happens. But the truth is if you're alive, you can make better choices, and there can be repair. There can be better quality of health and improvement. And so that's what I want you to be encouraged that you can improve. Now, what you do as far as, for example, with the GLP-1, right, those peptides that our body produces, you want to help your body by what we kind of talked about in regard to eating, for example. You want to try to balance your diet and not have so much processed foods, but have foods that fuel the peptide production. Some of those foods, and it kind of controls and slows down the digestive process, because oftentimes when we eat processed foods, our body is kind of often just moving through stuff so quickly. And so So we want to make sure we slow that process down, and having more fiber-rich foods in our diet is something that can really help with that. You can even do fiber supplementation that helps people digestion, but you count, which is psyllium husk, right? It's just an herb essentially, and it's a fiber that you can take in a supplement form. It's in a powder. It's not, when you supplement with fiber, it's usually not an enjoyable thing. The way I do it is I mix it in water and I drink it down real fast, because it's not something you're gonna like necessarily enjoy. But every time I take fiber, almost maybe 5 or a few minutes after, I almost feel like better. I feel kind of like my body's like taking a deep breath, internally, like, and that's something that I've noticed. I take one that has psyllium husk and has some additional herbs in it that help with these production of good peptides and hormone balance and all of that. Obviously, trying to avoid imbalancing your blood sugar and how that is affected by our sleep patterns and when we eat during the day and how often, that can have a huge impact on our peptide production. So here's some specifics in that regard. Most people in our day and age they're not eating breakfast and drinking coffee, and they call it intermittent fasting. But the reality is we've learned what fasting is, right? Fasting is avoiding things, but specifically you're avoiding things that your body physically or your flesh wants, right? And so what you want to think about in regard to intermittent fasting is essentially, intermittent fasting is time restricted eating. Okay. That's really a better way to think about what intermittent fasting is I'm restricting the amount of time that I'm eating to this window. Okay. Well, if we're awake, our body is trying to function. It's trying to use hormones and nutrients to do what it needs for our brain function and our physical function. And if we wake up in the morning and we don't eat anything and give it a stimulant that if you look at research, it doesn't necessarily nourish. Some people have different opinions on caffeine, but the stimulant effect that caffeine has can create more stress on the body. So that's something that's important to know. So if you're waking up, operating without fuel, and putting more stress on the body, your body is going to go into a mode of holding on to things that it will need later, because you're in what is called a fight or flight kind of state chemically. And when you're in that fight or flight state chemically, your peptide and digestive function is going to be turned down, because the focus is going to be on the survival mechanisms. Your limbs and your brain function are going to be given all the blood flow so that you can survive, right? Usually that needs to be done when we're running from, a tiger, or like trying to save our life in some way. But as a society, we've kind of been doing that to ourselves every single day, every single morning. And that is I think one of the big things that has been leading a lot of people to have these imbalanced peptides. And so if you just make a little bit of a shift where you stop eating, rather than making your feeding window late in the day, make your feeding window more front loaded in the day. If we're doing intermittent fasting, let's try this. Let's try a small little breakfast. You don't need to have a huge breakfast, but something that gets your body some fuel. It's able to say, okay, I'm able to rest and digest and take care of what I need to repair myself. So we give it a little bit of fuel first thing in the morning. And then throughout the day, to avoid blood sugar dips, we take a little bit of a healthy snack every 3-4 hours. Okay. So that blood sugar dip doesn't happen too much and creates another stress response, right? Another fight or flight kind of underlying, inflammation response. And so, that's one of the things I would encourage people to try and see how much of an effect it has over a 3-month period of trying to eat breakfast and having a snack every 3 to 4 hours, snack or meal. And then, maybe cutting off your eating around 6 or 7 at night and having that fasting window start then, and then eating again for breakfast rather than eating later in the day, and that kind of being the feeding window. So, yeah.
Hey, Jason, we're at the end of the hour here.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to leave us with or finish with before we start concluding?
I mean, that last slide, I guess, is something that I would put up. Is there is hope for healing? I mentioned it earlier. We're not going to be, we're not going to live forever, right? And we're not going to be totally, relieved of all health issues or all pains. But we can heal, we can repair, we can improve. If we're alive, we can. And Jesus showed us many times that it has so much to do with kind of the mindset we talked about earlier. That's where the start is. It has to do with, do we believe and trust God that he will bring us into a better place, a healing lifestyle, and do we act that out, right? Do we live that out? Do we take steps? And that's based on evidence, right? Jesus said multiple times when he healed people, he said, your faith has made you well. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scriptures there where he said that I reference here. And that's what I would encourage you is, like, you can be in a better place than you are now in regard to your health. And God has given you tools to do that. And so I'd encourage you to do at least one small thing better today or tomorrow that can help, and try to be consistent with some of those things. So
great. Okay, we're gonna bring you back because I got a lot of good comments here. People are interested in the subject matter, and you do well in presenting it. So thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you very much. It's been very informative, and we're happy to have had you today. So again, want to thank everybody for their comments. Thank everyone for watching today, and definitely thank you, Jason, for being a part of this. And we will say goodbye for now, and see everybody next week on another edition of Prove All Things. So goodbye for now.